becoming a father, maybe in the next 24 to 36 hours. You better make this
weird.
You better make this a good show then.
No pressure, right? Well, we had a great stream earlier today on SNBL, so yeah, no pressure to follow it up, right?
Yeah.
If only there was some news that broke today, that would make this show go a little better.
Yeah, Austin had it in the ticker. It's what everyone's been talking about today. It's the J.D. Spielman announcement that he has entered the transfer portal. I do want to make one correction to what Austin said, that J.D. needs to sit out a year. That is true if he stays at the Division I level, but he could transfer down and play right away. He could go D2, he could go D3, he could go NAI and play right away. Now, you may sit there and scoff at that a little bit, but I could see a case where he'd go D2 and play right away and get ready for the NFL. We'll get that's just out there. But, JD, we heard this when Scott Frost had his press conference before spring practice back in March that JD had left the team, that he had some things he was working on. And I think the longer this dragged out, I think the feeling was we'd probably seen the last of J.D. Spielman in a Husker uniform. And that saddens me. He was a terrific player to watch play. I mean, I really enjoyed watching J.D. play throughout his Husker career, and he had some terrific games for Nebraska. The all-time receiving yardage game in Husker history is his, and it will be for, I think, some time. That was against Ohio State a couple years ago. It may be hard to beat what he put up in that game against the Buckeyes. But he had a tremendous career at Nebraska. But with each passing day, Ben, that went from whenever it was in early March to the exact time he left, and we don't know that for sure, but somewhere late February, early March, he left the team. With each passing day, you kind of had the feeling he wasn't coming back in a Husker uniform. So when this broke today, I wasn't exactly shocked.
No, in fact, I would have been surprised if it was the other result, if he did come back. I think, and I can't speak for you, but we talk pretty much every day, and I don't think either of us got the sense that JD coming back was a real possibility. And my whole approach to the offseason, Greg, has been Nebraska's going to go through this season without him. I haven't once imagined next year's team when I went back and watched all last year's games, or talking to different people, doing this show, doing other shows. Not once was I under the assumption that JD was going to be a Husker next year. When I start thinking about what Nebraska is going to look like next year, specifically in the wide receiver room, I always just figured it was without JD. I mean, so this isn't a bombshell. I'm not scraping to figure out, okay, well, what does this mean for the other guys? And this is all stuff that you've had time to process. If you follow Husker football, you're around the team, you had a feeling that this was a real possibility and that this was going to happen. So, look, now that it's finally over, I think that's my first thought is I'm glad it's finally over. I'm glad there's not that speculation. I'm glad there's not that, gray area in the sky. And I'm also happy that this happened before Nebraska really got started going again. I think if this were going to lead them on, lead the coaches on. Now, I think the coaches had a much firmer grasp on this than maybe we are even aware of, the unlikeliness that he came back. But, you don't have to write him any game plans. He's not taking away practice reps from anybody else. Now, granted, it would have been a long way away for him to even be on campus and doing that type of stuff, but you're not left wondering. And that's important for guys like Wandale. It's even more important for those younger players in the program that are going to get those snaps. Guys like Demarion Houston and Jamie Nance and Marcus Fleming, Alante Brown. These are the guys that are actually going to be in there taking those snaps in practice and getting ready. And I think that's important too. So I've been approaching this year with the mindset that JD wasn't going to be a part of the team, and as of today, that's the reality.
Yeah, and wherever he lands, he lands. You wish him good luck. You thank him for the 3 years that he put in here at Nebraska. He was a very, very productive player for the Huskers the last couple of years. But let's talk more about what that now leaves that position. And you look at what's not back from last year. Kanawai Noah was one and done for Nebraska, grad transfer. Mike Williams, Teron Woodyard. Now you add in J.D. Spielman off last year's team. You have really one guy, Ben, that caught really any passes. And it's Wandale Robinson that is back. Cade Warner had a couple of grabs, but outside of that, what are we looking at? I mean, you talk about instant pressure on Omar Manning. It's there, right?
It is. There's no doubt. And Omar and Xavier Betts and Alante Brown and Demarion Houston and, all of those guys that are going to be forced to get reps. Here's another thing to think about, Greg. Last year, other than JD at the time, and we knew Wandale was going to be a big part of that, but you kind of had the same thing. I remember being at some early practices with you, looking out at that receiver core and going, because JD didn't practice a lot in the spring, going, well, who's going to catch passes? And my question is, as a fan, would you rather have guys that you've seen before at a really inconsistent level, like a Mike Williams or a Jerron Woodyard, or would you rather have the situation that you're dealing with now with guys that you're not sure what they can do? I mean, what situation are you better off with? You know what I mean? Like, if you think about last year with Mike and Jerron, you knew they were going to be consistently inconsistent. We don't know what we're going to get with Omar Manning, Xavier Betts, and some of these other guys. We have no idea. So, I think, yes, it's a scary situation because, as you said, there's only 3 guys on the roster who have caught a pass in a college game. But at the same time, the amount of opportunities and clean slate that these guys have could be a good thing for the offense. You better hope that they can line up in the right spots. They know the playbook. They can run the routes. They can do all the things that Nebraska was inept at last year outside of 1 or 2 guys. So, yeah, it's scary, but I think having Wandale back there immediately, he's comfortable. He's going to be just fine. And you're right, a lot of that weight is going to be felt by Omar Manning. But there's another part to this too, Greg, that we're not talking about. That's the tight end position. It's time for those guys to step up and make some life a little easier on those wide receivers too.
I should also throw the name Chris Hickman in there because I believe Chris Hickman's going to get shifted completely now from tight end to wide receiver, and he lined up at wide receiver last year. Let me refresh everybody's memory because it was a big wide receiving class for Nebraska. Xavier Betts, Alante Brown, Marcus Fleming, Omar Manning, Will Nixon, another guy, coach's kid from down in Waco who's going to be in here. There's great opportunity for these young guys. And the receiving position, Ben, is something you can come in and make a pretty immediate impact. We've seen it with Wandale. We've seen it at Purdue. Look at Purdue the last 2 years. The Bell kid last year, Rondale Moore 2 years ago, came in and were instantly jumping into this thing. So you got Manning, who's a junior college young man entering the program, and then you have some freshmen who right there, the playing time is available to them to go. I was excited about this group on signing day back in December when all these kids came in the fold. Now, here you go. You came here to play. Here's your opportunity to go out and grab some spots.
And it's also a good recruiting pitch because I know there's a number of wide receiver targets out there for this staff for future years going, look at our cupboard. I mean, you want to go someplace and get, if you can take care of the things they need to take care of, know the playbook, that type of thing, this is a place where you can come get 100 targets a season. Now, not to say you're going to catch 100 balls, but you're going to get the ball thrown your way a lot. As long as you're taking care of the things that you need to and meeting the expectations that we have of our receivers and of our program, there is a huge opportunity for you to go make plays through the air at a big-time university in a big-time conference. I mean, if I'm a recruiting coordinator, that's where I start. I mean, that's of all the things to pitch to an athlete, that's probably where you start. And look, I understand that it's going to be scary when we run out there, hopefully against Purdue as scheduled in early September, and we're taking a first snap, and other than Wandale, we don't know who's going to be out there. But I think in terms of physical ability to be on the field right now, Nebraska has a couple of those guys right now, and it starts with Omar. I mean, physically, he's a Big Ten receiver right now. That was the hesitation with some of those guys that have redshirted that we haven't talked about, the Jamie Nances, the Demarion Houstons. Those guys needed time to get physically ready. Those guys needed time to get their bodies used to what going across the middle in a Big Ten game and getting your head taken off you have to get your body in a position to be able to take those kinds of hits. Now you hope they take those steps forward. I guess we won't know until we hear the coaches kind of break them down whenever camp gets started.
All right, you have some thoughts about JD's departure. Would love to hear from you. 866-HUSKER 1-866-487-5371. Nate Klaus, Husker Online, coming up here in a couple of minutes. Nebraska did pick up a commitment over the weekend. Linebacker Seth Malcolm from Tabor, Iowa, the second young man from the state of Iowa to commit to Nebraska for the 2021 class, makes the third inside backer to commit to Nebraska. And Barrett Ruud probably finishes that room off, provided all the verbal commitments stay through the signing period in December. But we'll get Nate's take on Seth Malcolm. 8-man football player. Ben, that's pretty rare. You got to go back probably 15, 16 years since Nebraska has signed an 8-man football player. Got to be challenging to break down tape on those young guys. You have to have probably seen them in some camp situations, because usually when you're playing 8-man football, you're the linebacker, you're the running back, or the quarterback. You're playing all kinds of positions all over the place. You totally love watching those 8-man championship games at Memorial Stadium. It is a different kind of football, but you can certainly see what kind of athlete you are, because you're running in space a heck of a lot more.
Yeah, I feel like you're certainly pretty well rounded as an athlete, right? I mean, you kind of have to be able to do those things necessary to play all those positions. Now, I think the one worry that some people are going to have, and probably the biggest question that Mr. Malcolm's going to face when he comes to Lincoln, is a step up in competition. It's pretty dramatic as it is from high school to college. You think about some of those big-time programs, Greg, like Bishop Gorman in Vegas or the IMG Academies in Bradenton. Those are all Division I, even Miami Northwestern in the Miami-Dade County area. That's a big-time area, and there's a lot of Division I athletes. So probably the step up, it's still dramatic, but it's quite the step up from those places and those schools as it would be to 8-man football in the state of Iowa. So I think you hope he handles it in a way that is mature. I think he probably understands what type of challenges in front of him. And the great thing about those kids, Greg, from those 8-man schools, they don't back down from challenges like that. They're not scared of it. Most of those guys are on farms, working 12-hour days in the summertime when it's 100-plus degrees. They don't really shy away from contact or anything like that. So I bet it's a challenge that he embraces. But I think the big positive here is, other than Nebraska gets him, he took him away from some Big Ten schools and a state over in Iowa that were interested in him.
Yeah, Iowa State, K-State, I think, may have been his two finalists, and I know Minnesota was sniffing around as well. So, and we always talk about the offer list is usually a pretty good indicator. Malcolm had a pretty good offer list. I mean, there were a lot of Big 12, Big 10 schools that were interested in him as well, and he becomes a Husker. We'll get Nate Klaus's take on that. Also, later in the hour, an NCAA subcommittee has put out a, quote, preseason calendar for college football programs to follow. It's got to be passed by the full council here in a couple of weeks, but it looks like it's pretty promising. We'll go over some of the dates of that. They are pretty interesting. Before we head to the phone, let's stay in Lincoln and chat next with James. Good evening, James. Welcome to Sports Nightly.
Welcome, guys. Hey, I'm just curious on your guys' take. I mean, how do we lose a guy like that? He's been on campus here now for several years. He's set. If he would have stayed, he would have been set to have just about every receiving record that we have. And yet he chooses to leave, to depart. You talk about how, as a recruiter, you can say, well, our cupboard's empty, and that'll help us recruit. I'm thinking if I'm another school like Iowa, Minnesota, I'm going to say, here, they had a superstar athlete, and he was unhappy enough that he left.
Yeah, it's a fair point. To me, from what and look, I should preface this by saying, and I've said this before about JD, I don't know JD. He's one of the guys on the team that I have spent very little. I think I've interviewed him twice while he's been on campus. He's just a young man I've never gotten to know. So I can't speak to, his motives off the field, what's important to him or what he's thinking. I don't have a read even on him as a person, so I can't speculate on that, but as I could maybe some other players on the team. But, I think with JD, as you mentioned, clearly it's not an on-field situation. This isn't something that he's unhappy with his playing time, his use in the offense, whatever it is. It's clear that this is an off-the-field type issue, whether there's some rift with some coaches, he was having class issues, didn't like the professors here. I don't really know. I can't get into the particulars of what that might be, but Greg, it's pretty obvious. I mean, and James kind of laid it out there. This isn't something that isn't a fit. It's not a scheme fit. It's not a him in the offense fit. It's not how they're using him. That's a guy that was getting 15 targets a game while he was on the field and is the biggest part of our offense. So clearly there was something that was not right with his situation off the field at Nebraska that's going to keep him away.
He was on to his third position coach. You go back, he was recruited by Keith Williams, the Mike Riley wide receivers coach. Then he had Troy Walters in Nebraska for the last 2 years, and then Troy Walters leaves, and here comes Matt Lubick in. So he's on to his third position coach. Maybe that unsettled him at some point in time. You heard Scott Frost rave about him back in March when he made the announcement that he was stepping away for the program for a while to get some things figured out. So as far as the head coach and at least his public comments about JD, those were glowing as well. So James, it's a puzzling thing. And again, I think JD's a complicated individual, to be honest with you. And I think he's got a lot going on. I think that, and hopefully he gets it figured out and can find some peace in his life to go out and compete for somebody in football, because he's really, really good. James, appreciate the call. I'm late for the break. We'll come back and check in with Nate Klaus of HuskerOnline.com. That's coming up next. Nate, appreciate you jumping on board with us. What do you think of the Malcolm youngster?
Well, I'm pretty impressed with Seth Malcolm, to be perfectly honest with you. And I mean, he's got a complete body of work with what he's accomplished there at Fremont Mills High School in Tabor, Iowa, just outside of Omaha, really. And I think when you look at it, you kind of have to almost consider him an in-state prospect. Much like Randolph Kapai out of Sioux Falls. Those kids that are right on the border, basically, of Nebraska. I think you kind of have to consider those guys in-state players, and Nebraska was the second team to offer Seth Malcolm, and they made him a pretty high priority. And as we know, Bear Root and this coaching staff, they've really tried to revamp that inside linebacker position and add a bunch of athletic guys there, and I think Seth Malcolm fits pretty well.
Nate, how hard is it to evaluate a young guy that's playing in 8-man football compared to the 11 versus 11?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a little bit more difficult. I think you have to project a little bit more. I think you have to go into the evaluation knowing that, hey, this is a kid whose ceiling is probably a lot higher than that of your traditional 11-man football prospect, whether that's even just a few steps up above 8-man, or whether that's the best 11-man. Some of these prospects that come from some of the biggest schools in the country, whether it be Texas, California, Florida, whatever. So you kind of have to go into it knowing that this is a kid that basically never comes off the football field for his team, that basically does everything from not just playing linebacker, but he's also the running back. He's also the kicker, the punter, the kick returner. I mean, he does everything. And so you have to keep that in mind when you're evaluating. But when you turn on the tape of Seth Malcolm, you see a kid that's 6'3", 200 pounds, runs extremely well. I think on the defensive side of the ball, he's somebody who can get downhill in a hurry and plug a gap. And he also is somebody that runs sideline to sideline, that can cover in space. I mean, he checks all the boxes that you're looking for out of an athlete, and he dominates the competition the way a D1 athlete should dominate, 8-man competition. So, I mean, it's rare. We haven't seen Nebraska bring on a scholarship 8-man player, I believe, since Andrew Shanley in the 2002 class coming out of St. Edwards. So it doesn't happen very often, but I think Seth Malcolm's certainly one of those players that, is going to be able to make that transition just fine.
Of the 9 in the class right now, 3 are linebackers. Do you think that's it for Coach Rude's group, or do you see them adding anybody else into that room?
Yeah, as things stand right now, assuming all 3 of those inside linebackers that they have committed stay committed, I think that's it. I think they've got room for 3 inside linebackers in this recruiting class, and There is maybe a little bit of a question mark surrounding Christopher Paul Jr. I think that if there's any of those three that you have to maybe keep an eye on, it would be him. The talented inside linebacker out of Georgia is still being pursued by an awful lot of schools, and so. But as of right now, I do think that's it. I think that Nebraska can kind of move on and turn its attention to some other positions of need.
Getting busy with Nate Klaus of HuskerOnline.com. Huskers got their 9th commitment over the weekend. Linebacker Seth Malcolm from the state of Iowa. Second guy from Iowa in this class. J.D. Spielman's name obviously has been dominating the headlines. Let's talk wide receiver. This class does have one in Sean Hardy, who committed just a couple of, 10 days ago. Out of Georgia. What about that position moving forward, and could there be some more movement at wide receiver as far as commitments here in the near future?
Yeah, I think there could be. Nebraska's in on a handful of really talented wide receivers that I would say that they're in pretty good position to eventually land a commitment from. One of those wide receivers is one of the top overall wide receiver prospects in the country, Latrell Neville, out of the Houston area, is 6'4", 190 pounds. Certainly kind of has that size that I think Nebraska has tried to address here over the last couple of recruiting classes. He was committed to Virginia Tech, just kind of backed off of that commitment and reopened things back up. And he's a player that Nebraska has been recruiting for an awful long time, and even though he was committed to the Hokies, they had not really backed off of that. I think they continued to stay in touch, being respectful about it, of course, but they've continued to stay in touch and with him and recruit him. And now that he's opened things back up, I think that Nebraska is certainly could be considered a leading contender for him. So that's certainly someone to keep an eye on. And then also staying in the Houston area, C.J. Guidry is an inside receiver, more of a slot receiver type that has kind of narrowed it down to 3 schools, and Nebraska is one of his top 3. He's one to keep an eye on too. And kind of conversely from Neville being 6'4", 190, Guidry is about 5'10", 185. He's that smaller, shiftier inside receiver. Could do a number of different things. Kind of play that duck R role potentially, as far as being someone who could take carries out of the backfield and also work out of the slot. So those are probably 2 of the top wide receiver options that Nebraska has on the board in terms of 2 players that I could see committing to the Huskers here pretty soon, and there's an awful lot of others too. And I think that as we've seen over the past few years under Scott Frost, there's always some guys that may not be on the public's radar that Nebraska has positioned themselves pretty well with too. So it wouldn't be surprised if there are a couple other names out there that we aren't just quite familiar with that could pop up at any point in time as well.
Nate, you mentioned a couple of guys from the state of Texas. Is there a renewed interest from the Nebraska standpoint in trying to get into that state a little bit more?
Yeah, it's a good point. That has been a state that Nebraska hasn't necessarily consistently pulled a ton of numbers out of here over the last, not just under Scott Frost, but really here over the last probably five plus years or more. And that has been an area I think the staff has wanted to try and address and try to get back into, especially in the Dallas and Houston areas. Ryan Held has been doing a really good job covering the Dallas Metroplex area. And then, of course, Greg Austin is from the Houston area, and he has a lot of connections down there, and he's kind of been the point man for a lot of prospects in the Houston area. So, and I think that's, over time, I think that's still an area where Nebraska can be productive and pull players out of Texas, and specifically in those 2 talent-rich areas.
Again, visit with Nate Klaus of HuskerOnline.com here on Sports Nightly. One of the things, and I've seen it on some of your message boards, is people are speculating, could this be a year Nebraska takes 2 quarterbacks in a class? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think Heinrich Harburg is going to be the lone scholarship quarterback in this class. Now, however, there was an offer that went out to a quarterback out of Massachusetts, kind of a prep school out in Massachusetts, a kid by the name of Jackson Burkhalter. That was have been able to confirm that was a walk-on offer that was given out. And a lot of times, when a kid will say, well, I've been, excited to be offered by Nebraska, sometimes you have to, there's no differentiation by the kid in terms of whether or not that was a full scholarship offer or if that was kind of a walk-on offer, a preferred walk-on offer, or whatever you want to call it, and have come to find out that was a walk-on offer. So they're definitely wanting to add another quarterback in the class, but more of a walk-on type of quarterback instead of bringing in two scholarship QBs, because the numbers are going to be limited in this 2021 class, at least smaller than what we've seen over the past 2 or 3 classes under Scott Frost. So I think that they want to, continue to bring in the best quality scholarship players that they can, but also kind of supplement that with the best walk-ons that they can get as well.
Nate, we're used to July or June being really active. Usually you have the Friday Night Light camps. Those have been postponed this year because of COVID. Usually you have a rash of commitments. Malcolm is the first one in this month of June. Do you anticipate, even without the camps, a couple of more coming through the door here before the 4th of July weekend?
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. I was just having this conversation with my wife the other night that usually I'm out on the road following the coaches around on their satellite camp tour, going from Georgia, through Florida and the South, and then heading back home and catching the Friday Night Lights camps and everything. So it's kind of weird not doing that this year. But and you're right. Traditionally, June is the month where Nebraska's recruiting classes really just explode. And you usually have a lot of people in for a Friday Night Lights camp. We saw them bring a lot of people in for the pipeline offensive line, defensive line camp last year, and they kind of piggyback some official visits off of those big events, and that's just not going to happen this year. But I do think that we are going to see a handful of commits potentially happen, as this month progresses. I don't think that it's going to be completely stagnant. With the NCAA kind of extending out the recruiting dead period now to the end of July, I think a lot of players that may have been on the fence with a handful of schools, but wanted to take those visits. I think those players are now going to be making a decision instead of waiting. And I think from talking with players like that, is the fear is that they're going to miss out on their top school because they fill up, because programs all across the country are accepting commitments, even though a lot of these players have not visited. And it's kind of put the recruits in a bad situation where maybe they're going to have to speed up their process a little bit more than they had wanted to initially. So I do think that we could see Nebraska pull a couple more, maybe 2, 3, 4 more commits in the month of June as the days go by.
All right, last thing. What's going on with TJ Bullers? It looks like he's been tweeting some cryptic stuff here in the last week or so. Is he close to making a decision here? What's your gut say?
Yeah, I think he is close to making a decision. I think Wisconsin has been kind of that leader for him for a while now. And, he's one of those recruits that I think had wanted to take all of his official visits, and Nebraska was one of those places that was set to get one of those officials, as was Wisconsin and a handful of other schools. But he's kind of making it. If you read the tea leaves on social media, which is awful difficult to do sometimes with some of these recruits, he's made it kind of seem like he's nearing a decision. And if I had to guess right now, I would say Wisconsin is the odds-on favorite to land his commitment, but he is very close with an awful lot of, recruits that Nebraska's after, awful lot of recruits that Nebraska has committed, most notably Henry Latofsky, who's also from Iowa, They train together, they go fishing together. That's a really good connection. And by the way, he's really close with Eric Chenander and the whole coaching staff too. I think Eric Chenander has done a terrific job of recruiting the state of Iowa since he's been here, and we're kind of seeing the fruits of that labor kind of pay off here. So we'll see what happens, but I would say right now Wisconsin's probably the favorite.
Well, Nate, great stuff. It's been a while since we've caught up. Good to hear your voice. Appreciate all the efforts and work and following you in the gang on HuskerOnline.com. I know it's a busy month. Hopefully you can stay cool. Hopefully Huskers get some names coming through the door here in the next few weeks.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Greg.
There he is, Nate Klaus, HuskerOnline.com, joining us on our Sports Nightly Hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. Ben will rejoin me next. We want to know who your pick for the best Husker football player who played 8-man high school football would be. Your choices are Joel Makovica, Scott Shanley, Terry Keneally, or you can leave a comment for another. And Ben, apparently Husker fans like their fullbacks.
Well, it's news to me. Never would have guessed that the fullbacks would be a popular selection here in Lincoln.
Joel Makovica, with over 160 votes, gets 68% of the vote. I mean, he's running away with this thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, that, and he played in an era in which lends itself to popularity.
All those guys did. Keneally was a starter on that defensive line in '94. The Tom Osborne's first. Shanley was early 2000s, went on to a pretty good career, I think, with the Saints in the National Football League. But, yeah, Husker fans love their fullbacks. You want to go vote, again, at Husker Sports, the Twitter follow. The pick for the best Husker 8-man football player from high school football, and it's heavy, Joel Makovica, right now. 866-HUSKER-1, 866-487-5371. Back to wrap up the hour next.
You're listening to Sports Nightly. This is the Husker Sports Network.
Fill up to get to work, to camp, to grandma's, to the movies, to the skate park, to try the world's best tacos, to watch the sunset at Mount Rushmore, to ride on a green fiberglass dinosaur. Fill up your life. From the greatest monuments to those little moments, Sinclair is proud to fuel America's journeys. Go farther for less with DinoCare, Sinclair's top-tier engine cleaning gasoline. Learn more at sinclairoil.com.
Now order your groceries online and get them even faster with Hy-Vee Aisles Online same-day pickup. Just choose the Get It Faster option for only $9.95 and pick up your groceries in as little as 2 hours. Plus, we've added even more pickup times to choose from. You'll find the same great deals as in-store. Free pickup on orders over $30 and no-contact pickup and delivery. Download the Hy-Vee Grocery app today and pick up groceries in as little as 2 hours. Some restrictions apply.
Now you can get a great-looking cut in less time every time with an Exmark. The Mowers Landscape Pros trust 2-to-1 over the next best-selling brand of mowers.
Exmark knows living happens outdoors and that you can trust their Radius zero-turn riders to get on and off the lawn more quickly, so you can spend less time mowing and more time doing the things you love. Check out the Exmark Radius today at your local Exmark dealer.
Exmark, ready to work for you.
In sports, success is measured in the number of points scored, in games won, and in championships earned. At Shelter Insurance, we measure success in the quality of our products and services, in how we support our communities, in being there when you need us most. In fact, 9 out of 10 people surveyed with a claim would recommend Shelter to a friend. To find out how Shelter can be there for you, visit shelterinsurance.com. We're your shield. We're your shelter.
This is the Husker Sports Network from Learfield IMG College. You're listening to Sports Nightly.
At Union Bank, people don't have your money. Your money has people. First home people, investment people, people who answer the phone and your chats, dream car people, dream retirement people, driving your dream car in your dream retirement people, small business people, credit card people, and all the other people you need. At Union Bank, our people help you do more than you dreamed possible. So stop in and say hello. We can't wait to see you. Union Bank and Trust. Member FDIC.
The Husker Sports Network is always on the air on Facebook and Twitter. Like the Husker Sports page on Facebook and follow at Husker Sports on Twitter. You'll get exclusive up-to-the-minute coverage of your Huskers, including live football practice reports, previews of what you'll hear on Sports Nightly that night, instant reaction and analysis on Husker news, and Nebraska athletics coverage that you can't see or hear anywhere else. Follow the Husker Sports Network on Twitter and like the Husker Sports Network on Facebook today.
We're back on a Sports Nightly Monday night. I teased this earlier in the hour, but an NCAA committee that is working on making recommendations, it's an oversight committee, has put together, Ben, a preseason calendar for college football teams to follow. Now, this has to go through a full vote of the Sports Council here in about a week or so, but voluntary workouts, which are underway now, will go through June 25th. Then on July 13th, team workouts can take place. Weight training, conditioning, film review, officially workouts. The 24th of July, you can have 20 hours a week the coaches can be around the players. Usually it's 8 until you get to the season, at least the preseason. But on the 24th of July, it ups to 20 hours a week. That'll be walkthroughs, team meetings, and then full practices can begin on August the 7th. Looks like this is probably the calendar they're going to have. So in essence, they're going to have about 6, almost 7 weeks, Ben, to get ready for a season that begins on the weekend of September the 5th.
Yeah, I think this was an effort from the NCAA to help those schools that didn't get the adequate springtime. But in doing this and trying to cast a blanket over everybody, the rich get richer if you did have that practice time, because now you're just getting even more time to drill home and recap what you did in the spring before fall camp gets started while incorporating your incoming freshmen. So, yes, it does provide schools like Nebraska, who only had 2 spring practices, the opportunity to at least learn the playbook, get in that strength room, get in the film room, do some of the things that you can do, to get ready for a season that's not practice. And then, of course, obviously, as you said, August 7th, get ready for camp. But at the same time, if you're one of those schools that have already kind of checked that spring practice off your box, this is just more time that you have to prepare. So, yes, it's helpful for a school like Nebraska, but it's even more helpful for those schools that were able to get most, if not all, of their spring practice in.
You realize what we were supposed to be doing July 24th, aren't you?
Yeah, media days, right?
Yeah. That was going to be the 23rd and 24th. You and I were supposed to be in Chicago getting our deep dish. Not going to happen.
We could still go. There just wouldn't be any Huskers there.
Nobody to interview. We can go hang out with Teddy.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be all bad, actually.
Yeah.
You'll be on diaper duty July 24th. Callers and guests into our show. Dial us up on our Sports Nightly hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. Thanks to Nate Klaus for spending some time with us. Great update from him from HuskerOnline.com on his thoughts on Seth Malcolm, the young man who committed to Nebraska over the weekend, and where Nebraska football recruiting is headed. Always good to hear from Nate here during this hour. Let's start, and Evan, I hope you're doing well. Let's start with the JD news. Were you surprised when you heard that earlier today?
Hey, Greg. No, I wouldn't say that it was a shocker by any means. I mean, I feel like when Coach Frost said in March that JD was stepping away from the team for a personal health matter, and, you kind of talked to some folks behind the scenes, it kind of felt like the writing was maybe on the wall a little bit then. The coaching staff had held out hope that maybe they would get him back. Obviously, he's a productive member of the team. He was the leading receiver for them in 2019. It's just kind of one of those things where it's hard, I think, for any student athlete to stay somewhere for 5 years now. That would have been what JD did had he stayed, given that he redshirted in 2016. And, you kind of follow him on social media, and he, his mind is, I think, is oftentimes elsewhere. It's on some of the bigger picture issues going on in the world. He can very much be around football, given that his dad is the GM of the Minnesota Vikings. And so, I think there were just a lot of different little things. Sometimes it's hard to say, right, because he doesn't do a lot of interviews. But I think from kind of the outside looking in, it felt like there were a lot of little things that maybe stacked up. And, Ultimately it looked like for both Nebraska and for JD, maybe that now is the time for them to go on and go their own ways, and I think it'll probably be best for both sides in the end.
Evan, how do you view that position now? I mean, it's skinny on experience. Wan'Dale Robinson, really about the only guy that's made many catches at this level. How do you view that wide receiver spot?
Yeah, I mean, it's wide open, isn't it, Greg? I mean, Cade Warner would be kind of the veteran walk-on of the group, too. But, yeah, I mean, Cade wasn't slated to be here in the spring. Obviously, they were going to have 4 scholarship receivers at that point. And Wan'Dale, I mean, like you mentioned, most experienced guy, he spent most of the year playing running back out of necessity. So, wide open room. And so I think now the shift in focus really turns to this incoming group. I mean, my goodness, what an opportunity for this incoming group. I think we all know about Omar Manning and what he can maybe do on the outside, given Nebraska that big-bodied receiver that it hasn't had in a long time. Xavier Betts will be coming to town. Alante Brown through 2 practices in March was already, turning some heads, inside the locker room with what he was doing. Marcus Fleming is another true freshman who was a burner out of the state of Florida. I mean, one of the top handful of guys in terms of the 100-yard dash out of that state, which is mighty impressive. And then Will Nixon, kind of that Duck R guy in the mold of what Wan'Dale Robinson can do too. So really interesting freshman class. And beyond that, just a handful of guys that they have coming back on scholarship too. Jamie Nance, can he take that next step? Demarion Houston. And then, of course, factor in, just the idea that this whole room has a new coach in Matt Lubick who's coming in. And so, in some ways, this position is just going through a total reset. New coach, new players, not a ton of experience really anywhere. And so, a lot of the talk in the offseason with Matt Lubick's hire was he was an extension of Coach Frost. They had a lot of similar philosophies. They were on the same page with terminology and all this. And, man, if ever that were to, come into play and benefit a team in transition, it feels like this might be that situation.
Evan Bland's with us from the Omaha World Herald. Also, you can read his work online at omaha.com. I mentioned you cover football and baseball of the Huskers for the Omaha World Herald. You've also been doing a lot of stories about dunking the basketball. What's this all about?
Oh yeah, totally. Total versatility here on my part, writing about basketball. No, yeah, it was kind of a fun story over the weekend, just looking at that 2021 class for Nebraska, up to 9, I believe, commits now, with Seth Malcolm out of Fremont Mills in Western Iowa committing over the weekend. But it's been a really interesting class to follow because you have some guys that really prefer to stay under the radar, but you also have a handful of guys who, as far as I can recall, are peer recruiting and interacting more publicly than really any recent Nebraska class I can think of. And so you got, Heinrich Harbarg out of Kearney Catholic, who's the quarterback. He's kind of taken I would say, the reins over as kind of the leader of that peer recruiting. You can see what he does on social media, interacting with other recruits and with some of the targets that Nebraska is going after. And so he was actually the guy who came up with their latest kind of venture into engaging other players. And so I think, as a lot of Husker fans know, there are a number of targets out there that Nebraska wants. Thomas Fedoni is probably right at the top of that list, a tight end from Lewis Central High School in Council Bluffs. And so, Harbarg essentially engaged him on social media and said, hey, we're going to have a dunking contest, and, post your best dunks, and we'll see what the fans can say, and they'll get involved. And so, to hear him tell it, Fedoni went outside at his friend's house that very night and started posting dunks. And Harbarg said, oh boy, this guy's going to show me up if I don't get out there right now and get some of my own, slams out there for people to see. And so he got that going. Henry Letusky is another Nebraska commit who put out a couple. Teddy Prohaska out of Elkhorn South also kind of threw down a little bit. And so, you're just seeing Marcus Mbo is another target, offensive lineman out of Wisconsin, who kind of got in this. And there's just a lot of trash talk going on. Is the hoop really 10 feet tall? Can't you come up with something a little more creative than just a straight finish? Things like that. So, just one of those cool things where official visits aren't being allowed right now. There are not a lot of ways for players to get to know each other and to be social. And so this is something I think that fans appreciated, and that ultimately, maybe a tiebreaker for some of these recruits down the line and these Nebraska targets who maybe have been to a lot of schools, but maybe they don't have that, that camaraderie or that rapport with some of their fellow 2021 peers. So just kind of a cool thing as this class develops where you can really see relationships build and maybe potentially a few extra recruits coming on board who could help Nebraska down the line.
I love it. It just seemed showing kids being kids, and that was what was fun about the whole thing. And a couple of those guys even were doing like a fishing contest at one point in time. That might have even been the polar bear who's on campus now with his incoming class. It was a part of that, but it was a fun read. I'd encourage people to go and check that out. I've mentioned baseball twice. You also covered Husker baseball, which certainly got short-shifted this past spring with the shutdown with the COVID-19. It's also affected these guys trying to find places to play this summer. You did a deep dive into that last week. What did you find out?
Yeah, it was, just one of those things where in a normal year, players would be getting ready to head out. We'd be into College World Series preview type mode this week, and if your team wasn't playing, then you'd be heading out to a summer league and kind of getting settled in with a host family, doing that sort of thing. Well, in Nebraska's case, in talking with their volunteer assistant, Danny Marcuzzo, who coordinates that stuff, he said, yeah, they were done by February. They had everybody who had to play in the summer set. But as we know, with the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of those summer leagues closed. Some were still indefinite, and so there was kind of a mad scramble there over the last couple of months that still, to my knowledge, hasn't quite finished out yet, where Nebraska, as well as a lot of Division I programs across the country, are trying to find at-bats, find innings for their players. I mean, if you're missing out essentially on most of a spring of development, you don't want to miss out on the summer too. And so some of these leagues are closed. I think Marcuzzo estimated maybe 70% of summer leagues have already been shuttered here for the summer. And so just kind of an example of, some behind-the-scenes work that the coaching staff has to do. This is the sort of thing that could, bleed over into 2021. I think of a guy like Joe Acker a couple of years ago who got a ton of summer ABs, and coaches in the fall said, man, this is a different guy coming back. And so that's what you want as a program, is to get your guys out there, maybe in some instances help them build up some confidence and have some success. Maybe in other instances, learn how to fail a little bit and see what some elite level competition is like and how you can bounce back from, an 0-for-4 night or getting maybe beat around on the mound or whatever it might be. And so it looks like, Nebraska's roughly 25 or so players are going to get slotted, and as of a few days ago anyway, all but 4 had been. So I think that's a promising sign for Nebraska when you're talking about coming back in the fall and getting ready for next season, that most of these guys, it looks like at least, will have the chance to get out and get back on the diamond and maybe take that next step in their development.
Which is really big, particularly for guys who didn't get, and this year it's everybody, didn't get many innings on the mound or many ABs. It's skimpy, though, right? A lot of these leagues have folded up and said they're not going to go, and so the opportunities were really rare to try to. Well, who was Danny Marcuzzo, the one that was kind of helping place these guys in some of these leagues?
Yeah, yep, he was. He was, he, I think, will be happy to maybe move on to the next step in life after this thing is set. But yeah, he was kind of that guy. I think one thing that probably played to Nebraska's favor was that the Northwoods League is going to continue. It looks like right around the early part of July is when that thing will get going. I think they had 10 Huskers who were slated to go to that. That's long been a popular league for Nebraska, send players to. And, otherwise you just kind of have a handful of guys all over the country. You take what you can get at this point, honestly. I mean, like I mentioned, sometimes coaches kind of go into the season and say, we really would like this guy to succeed this summer. We'd really like to challenge this guy. I mean, at this point, it's just, hey, do you have a spot? And it's so fluid, not just on Nebraska's end, but on the other end, too, where some of these programs might one day say, hey, we're full, and on the next day or two, they'll say, yeah, we got a couple spots because, maybe a host family fell through or a kid was a senior and decided that he was going to move on to that next step in his life. I think that's the other thing is, these guys aren't used to placing seniors who will either usually get drafted or move on with life or whatever it might be. So that was kind of the other part of this thing. And I think now that we're already into getting close on to mid-June, the situation's finally starting to settle a little bit, and I think Nebraska's got about most of the guys placed that they want to have placed.
Very good. Another good read by Evan that's up at omaha.com. All right, sir, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. Ben McLaughlin's about to jump in the same boat that you've been in the last 6 weeks, and that's taking care of a newborn. Ben's headed in with his wife tomorrow night to induce, and you're fairly fresh with diapers flying around your house, aren't you?
Oh man, that's right. It's sleep has been tough to come by, and I would just tell Ben, man, sleep when the baby sleeps, because you have that temptation to get work done when they sleep, but then when you want to sleep, it's not going to happen. So I would just say, in the short term, don't plan on being terribly productive.
Very good. Evan, we always appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Have a good one.
Evan Bland of the Omaha World Herald. Again, you can read his work online at omaha.com. Joined us on our Sports Nightly hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family. Evan Bland for spending some time with us. He had a great piece, Ben, about where all these Husker baseball players are going to spend at least part of their summer, and it's huge that the Northwoods League is going to open, albeit late, but that's where about 10 of the Huskers are headed here in a couple of weeks to get some ABs, some innings on the mound. I mean, all these college players and even kids coming out of high school right now, I mean, the only way to get better at a sport is for repetition. And in baseball, if you're not getting at-bats or throwing innings, you're not going to get better.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard. Keeping that focus, that feeling, that mentality in a simulated game or in a bullpen or in a batting cage compared to an actual game. Where it counts, where there's a score, where there's a count, all that stuff. I know pitchers are trying to, throw simulated games and keep their arm in shape, and that's great. And it's great for hitters, too, to be in there taking hacks. But it's another thing to be in a box facing a real pitcher or on the mound facing a real batter where there's a score and count and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's huge for those guys, especially those guys that – didn't get a ton of ABs, which happens to be the whole team this year.
Yeah. Everybody, up and down a lot of different levels. It's not just the college kids. It's the high school players. It's, minor leaguers are struggling for that too. And baseball may look a whole lot different in a year or two, particularly at the professional level after what's going on. There's a little bit of glimmer of hope that MLB may get something pieced together. Now they're talking about a 78-game schedule that the players, I think, are due to vote on it tomorrow. But what is today? The 8th of June? I mean, I think the earliest they could get going to be mid-July. They've missed a big window here where they just could have captivated American sports fans by not getting this thing figured out. While everybody was in downtime, they should have gotten it figured out. Now, you knew you didn't have a start date you could go up, but you should have figured out the parameters of what you were going to do once you were allowed and given the green light to get things going. They failed to do that, and it's costing them. I want to get your reaction to Conor McGregor, who put out an interesting tweet the other night saying he's retiring, that he's done. You buying that?
It's funny we're talking about this because it's almost to the point now where you don't really take these retirements too seriously because, Floyd Mayweather and plenty of others that have retired. Now, Ronda Rousey has stayed true to her retirement, and it was pretty clear that she was done. Even after that fight was over, it was clear that her time was up, and she wasn't going to get it back. I don't get that sense from Conor. I would be surprised if it was if we've seen his last fight. I really would. I think it means too much to him. Now I know he said in his Twitter poll that that he's kind of lost that passion or whatever it was. To me, it kind of sounded more like there wasn't a fight that excited him. There wasn't a fighter. There wasn't a Khabib. There wasn't those fights that really got his juices flowing. And if there ever is sometime soon somebody who's young and cocky and wants to run their mouth a little bit, maybe challenge him personally, I could see him getting back in the octagon. But it was a little surprising. I know he's taken on other ventures. He's a family man now. He's made his own whiskey. He's doing all these other things with his life that are keeping him busy. But I would be surprised if we do not see Conor McGregor fight again at some point. So, little surprised to see it, but at the same time, I'm not sure that announcement is going to be the end of it for him.
UFC has been back active for about a month now. Have you been locking into some of those Saturday night matches?
I've watched a couple of the fights. I didn't watch the fights this weekend, but from what all the accounts, the fights have been pretty good. And you go back to this last weekend. Amanda Nunes, she's famous for fighting, knocking out Rousey, knocking out Holly Holm, knocking out all these fighters in the first round, and to watch her fight or watch the highlights of fights for her, and then the young kind of star, I guess, is Sean O'Malley. You look at his perfect record, the way that he finished that fight, and he's kind of flamboyant in his own right. He's not afraid to voice what he thinks on Twitter or anything like that. He's kind of similar to McGregor in the way that he dresses his body with all the tattoos, a little bit different backgrounds. O'Malley was born in Montana, and McGregor was born in Ireland. But I think he's definitely got people's attention. 12-0 with the amount of knockouts that he has. The sport needs some young stars, and I think he could be it.
Yeah, UFC's been pretty active in the last month. NASCAR's now been going for a couple of weeks, getting big ratings with their television thing. I'm feeling a little bit better about Major League today than I did a week ago, but I almost feel like in some ways it's too late. I mean, when they get back, even if it's late July, they're going to compete, with the NBA Finals and NFL camps opening. I think they're going to get lost in the shuffle. I'm excited for this week, Ben. Golf is back. They're going to be down at the Colonial in Fort Worth. They got a great field. Like 15 of the top 20 players in the world are in this field. It's going to be a big field and full coverage. Golf Channel, CBS over the weekend for the Colonial. I think it's called something different now, but it's been long known as the Colonial. That gets going back this week. They've also been giving away Jack's tournament's going to be in mid-July, the Memorial, Jack Nicklaus's tournament in Ohio. That governor's given them the right to go ahead and expect to have fairly good crowds, galleries for that one. So you're seeing more and more of these things loosen up. We were on a call today, you and I were, with our radio crew we're still 3 months away from kind of kickoff, right? We still have plenty of time to kind of get this virus controlled a little bit and maybe get more fans through the stands at Memorial Stadium on September the 5th.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm trying my best to look at some of the reports from all other places in the country, and I can't remember some of the places off the top of my head, but there are specific regions in the United States that the trends are fantastic in the numbers that the coronavirus are going down and significantly improving. So that's a good thing. And as we keep saying, to be still 3 months away from kickoff, and we got to just hope this trend continues and the numbers keep going down and down and down, and hopefully by the time kickoff rolls around, maybe even conference play, assuming we're playing 12-game schedule, things can be as close to normal as possible. But following the numbers from different parts of the country, I know New York City's opening back up tomorrow, and there are other parts of the country that they're kind of not necessarily turning things loose back to the way they were, but getting back to the point where people can live their lives to some regularity.
All good news, really good news. Again, our Twitter poll is up. Who's your pick for the best Husker football player who played 8-man football? Joel Makovic, Scott Shanley, Terry Keneally are your choices, or you can leave some other name. Joel Makovic running away with it, 66% of the vote for the fullback. His brother also. We debated whether to put his brother in there as well, but we figured we better just go with one Makovic in our poll. So get on there and vote if you want to do that. When we come back, we'll get an SNBL update as Sports Nightly continues. Monday night, Greg Sharp, Ben McLaughlin, Austin Orman also with us on this program tonight. Sports Nightly Baseball League brought to you by Dorothy Lynch. Homestyle and light and lean dressing. We're coming down the stretch, Ben. We've hit the month of September in SNBL, and the pennant races are heating up.
Final week of the regular season. The end is near for a good chunk of the league, and for 2 of our 8 user teams. Standings, interesting in the AL West. I think the Mammoths have it all but wrapped up. They will be the number 1 seed. They will be the first team to 100 wins. They're at 98 right now, so hasn't happened yet, but they're well on the way. And then in our division, the NL East, things are tightening it up. I think you got a 2.5 game lead on the Farmers. I think I'm 6 back or something like that, so I'm likely not going to win the division, but the Farmers are right on your heels. But you're big Outlaw fans for the next few weeks, Greg, because I've got 6 with the Nebraska Farmers before the end of the season.
Well, now what's Josh's lead? Isn't it only like 3.5 over the Lions?
I think it's
more
5.5, 5.5 or 6.5.
Yeah. Josh has 5.5 on Nate, who's got a game and a half on.
Oh yeah, that's over then. So the battle is for who's going to get home field for the wild card, right, Austin?
That's it. Nate's got a game and a half on me, and that's looking like your AL wild card matchup because Brett's a handful of games behind me, so he's still in it.
He's done. We called it. Ben and I called that months ago.
You did. That you did.
I'm pretty sure it's mathematically impossible for Brett to make the playoffs. Pretty sure.
What do we have? We have like 15 regular season games left, something like that. We're going to speed our way through and be done with it on Friday, start our playoffs next week. So of the user teams, Brett's going to come up short, and the Cthulhu's, Tim's team's also going to come up short.
They're going to try and play spoiler to your Harriers tomorrow, Greg. They've got a battle with Hickman tomorrow. They're playing a lot better. This is the best record they've had all year in terms of winning percentage. I think they're Austin, like 12 games above 500. So
I believe they're 80 and 67.
Not
80
bad.
And 67, 13. Yeah, they're not messing around right now.
Yeah. Now they've had some injuries coming down the stretch. Like I think Grinke got hurt for them here. We just saw that maybe even today at the end of the stream today for that, but. This has been a lot of fun, and we've had more and more people jump on board and join the chat room when we do this. Where every morning, Monday through Friday, 11 a.m., we go live with. We generally go through 3 games, and we just have a lot of fun. We talk about a wide variety of things as we get through that chat room. Today, you guys got into a lot of football talk.
Yeah, the JD news actually broke while we were on, and it's great being able to get the fans' perspective. They get to know us away from just our jobs, we talk a lot about, just our personalities, our day-to-day lives, and, of course, Huskers, too. It's much more laid back and informal, sports nightly, and just kind of us just hanging out with the fans. So it's a good time. I mean, even if you're not into baseball or the SNBL, to just come chat Huskers with us and interact with other fans, it's been a lot of fun. It's been cool seeing people join in from all different parts of the state and even outside the state, too. So it's a good opportunity to come in and just hang out with us and, talk Huskers or talk whatever you want, whether it be sports or otherwise.
Had a newbie in there today. First time he'd been a part of the SNBL and was having a good time with us. How are the playoffs going to work? Do they mirror the MLB playoffs?
Yeah, so they do. There'll be a wild card game, which we pretty much have the matchups set right now. And then after that, we think it's going to go to the winners of the wild card will go play the best record. So even though the wild card winners will likely have right around 100 wins, if not 100 wins, they're going to have to go play the best team. So in this case, we're just going to assume it ended today, the Harriers or the Mammoths. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to see the a computer team make it to the CS round, even though we all know those teams aren't worthy. So I think it is going to emulate the Major League playoffs, and we're still working on how we're going to do it. But at least we've got Wild Card Monday figured out. We're just going to do the 2 wild card games a week from today, and then we'll kind of figure out the schedule after that.
All right. Austin, you're with me tomorrow. You and I are hosting the stream beginning at 11. Do we know our lineup of games for tomorrow?
We know the lineup. No pitching matchups yet. Still deciding on those. But the 3 games, Ben mentioned the Harriers Cthulhu's game. That leads us off right at 11. Game 2 of the day, we're in the American League West, a Lions-Mammoths matchup in Minneapolis. And then back to the NL East for Game 3. We have Outlaws-Farmers.
All right. I heard you guys today. You've already pegged it. It's going to be the Mammoths and the Farmers, you said. Austin, you may not have been a part of that. That's how Ben and Josh have it, as the Mammoths and the Farmers in the finals, and they might be right.
They very well could be, but I think they're underrating the league's 2 best teams. I think the Rowboats and the Harriers have been pretty solid, and they'll turn it on here late. So I'll just be the contrarian and go with that as my matchup.
Austin, who are you planning on starting in your wild card game?
I'm going to throw left-handed Jacob deGrom. I still like his stuff better than anyone else.
I thought he got hurt.
That's why he's throwing left-handed.
What?
I still trust Jacob deGrom's stuff. I mean, that's the guy I want out there. If that doesn't work, though, I will probably go with Clevenger.
Okay. So it'd be what? Clevenger against, I don't even know who Nate's ace is anymore.
It's got to be J.B. Wendelken, right? Nate's got to go bullpen game.
No, it's not him. Ben, you, if it stopped right now, and it doesn't, and I still think the Farmers could overtake me, but if it is the Farmers and the Outlaws, you're going to see somebody pretty good on that other mound.
Yeah, Garrett Cole's back, so that's bad news for me. The good news is we rocked Garrett Cole the last time we faced him, so hopefully that inspires the boys who have been some up but mostly down this year. It's hard to believe that we could potentially be a 100-win ball club with the amount of inconsistency that we've shown. But I've been saying the last week and a half in real time, so a month and a half, all of our preparation has been going into the wild card game. We're already thinking about how our lineup's going to be structured, how our pitching's going to be lined up, and we're just going to throw everything we have at whoever's in front of us.
See, I just have faith you're going to take out the Farmers in that wild card game. They'll be done.
You got faith, huh?
Out of here.
That would be so nice if that was the case, but we'll see.
Well, come join us every Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. We get going on the stream. You can access that by finding us off of our Twitter page. We got the address there. Our Twitch is where we pull all those up. We have a good time with that and get into all kinds of topics. Some of them are even sports-related. So we go through that. All right, when we come back, our weekend winners. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. Time for this week's weekend winners. Ben, what do you got?
Yeah, my winners are multiple winners. It's everybody that has sent well wishes, has showered baby McLaughlin with gifts, and just sent positive vibes our way for this week and offered any advice. It's a huge week. There's been so many people that have reached out and offered their support. So it's making this chaotic, stressful time a little easier to deal with, knowing so many people are in our corner. But one thing's for sure: whenever she does arrive, she'll have plenty of stuff thanks to the great family and friends in our lives. So shout out to everybody that's helped us or even just sent a nice note. We're blessed to have you all.
Very cool. You going to keep us posted?
I'll do my best, yeah. As long as it's in the parameters of what is and isn't allowed in the hospital, I'll do whatever I can.
All right, Austin.
Winner for me is Legion Baseball. We've talked about pro baseball having issues getting back, but Legion Baseball has a week of practice in as of now. They started a week ago. Doesn't seem to be any issues. I know my middle brother has his last year. He's young enough to come back for one more go around. He didn't get that ripped away. My youngest brother made the seniors team, so they'll get one more season to play together. And Legion Baseball still seems on. They're 10 days away from when you can have first pitch. There don't seem to be any hiccups through the first week, and I think that's an awesome sign.
Fantastic. I am with you. So happy for those young folks that get a chance to get some of their summer in. And as Ben's talked about a couple of different times, some of your greatest memories of growing up are hanging out with your buddies and your pals, whether you're playing baseball, softball, soccer, whatever it is. I'm so happy for that to be going on. All right, my story's a really cool one. My winner is Forrest Fenn. Now, Forrest Fenn is an art dealer and an author. Years ago, guys, he hid a chest somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, a treasure chest full of gold, jewelry, other valuables. Its net worth over $1 million. And he dropped out clues of where the chest was. Over the weekend, the chest was found. He posted on his website, the search is over. The person who found it did not want to be identified. I mentioned that he's an author. He inspired these treasure hunters by putting out a book, and within this poem that he wrote in a book, he detailed where the treasure was. It was, quote, "It was under a canopy of stars in the lush, forested vegetation of the Rocky Mountains, and had not moved from the spot where I hid it more than 10 years ago. That treasure chest got found over the weekend." How cool a story is that?
Wow. That's amazing. It sounds a lot like that show Outer Banks that I watched on Netflix, basically a searching for treasure, but
really,
except in real life. Man, I think that's kind of deep down on all of our wish list to go hunt down some treasure and find a chest and become rich off of that. I think that's a really, really admirable thing to do. And, man, shout out to the people that found that, because their lives are changed now.
10 years, a little over 10 years, people have been searching for that chest, and it got found over the weekend. Somebody back east, they said so. Somebody came out looking for it. You just wonder how many man-hours went into that and how many people went looking for that and felt like they had a chance to go find that baby.
Showed up to the Rocky Mountains with shovels and metal detectors and everything else, trying to hunt that thing down.
That's a cool thing. Kind of a throwback, right, to like the old pirate time where they all found maps and felt like they were going to go out and find the treasure in some deserted island out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Big time effort from those people.
Cool deal. All right, that'll put a wrap on this hour. Again, the big headline of the day, J.D. Spielman put his name officially into the transfer portal and not going to finish his career as a Husker. And as Evan Bland pointed out earlier in the hour, this would have been his 5th year on campus at Nebraska. He redshirted his first year, then had 3 really good seasons for the Cornhuskers, made his way up into the top 10 in most of the receiving charts. It's going to be a blow for Nebraska, but with one door closes, a bunch open. And for guys like Omar Manning, Xavier Betts, Will Nixon, going down the line, Alante Brown, there's going to be playing time out there, snaps made available to that Husker wide receiving core. They're going to have a chance to go get it. It'll be fun. Competition usually breeds something. It'll be fun to watch that group go to work, Ben, here in the next month.
Yeah, go take advantage of your opportunity and go make a name for yourself. That's why you come to a place like Nebraska and play in a Scott Frost offense and make plays. Now you've been given that opportunity.
Very good. Good hour. Again, thanks to Evan Bland for spending some time with us. Some really good stories. One about all those incoming recruits, showing videos of them dunking, and also an update on Husker baseball. Where are some of those guys going to be going during the summer months? All that right here on this hour. Sports Highlight.